As a noblewoman in 18th century Ireland, Lady Effie Beresford's name should have been forgotten through the mists of time and faded into obscurity. However, the chilling story of her passing is a winter that will never go away. The whispers travel from generation to generation, and the darkness that resides within the woodlands close to Curraghmore House is still felt by those daring enough to go near it. But for Lady Beresford, her horror began as a child when, entering the woodlands, she discovered a black ribbon that she felt compelled to keep even though she sensed a darkness within it. All ghost stories have an origin, an awakening, and this account is compiled from Lady Beresford's diary entries and translated into modern-day English. Although the story is fragmented, the entries have been compiled in chronological order. I want to start a diary because I'm already 12, and I fear that I will never truly know what it is like to have a family to share my dreams with. As an orphan, there's only darkness where love should be. I'm thankful for John, a foster child like me who also lives in the same farm cottage. He is the closest thing to family that I have, a brother that I have chosen. Here in County Waterford, nature is left truly unspoiled, full of unkempt grass and rushes and untamed briars. And when times are tough like now, it's this rugged landscape that makes me feel truly alive. However, despite its beauty, there is one place that we do not dare step: the mysterious woodlands that border Curraghmore House and cut through to the village. It's said that a darkness lives within these woodlands, and those who step within the trees are never truly themselves, ever again. There are ways to explore without taking the shortcut through the woodlands. John and I love exploring the grounds of the Curraghmore House. It's the grand estate close to our cottage. We went there together today. We peered through the gaps in the swirled iron gates and imagined we were part of the Beresford estate and living a life full of elegance and luxury. We never tire of imagining such a dream, however out of reach it may seem. June 15th, 1756. Today was different. As we wandered away from the Curraghmore House and back along the river, I watched John skim his stones across the water, which in turn rippled with its untold secrets. It was common to make the stone bounce 2 or 3 times if timed right, but this time, the stone made it onto the other side of the river. We ran across the bridge to see where it landed, frankly giggling with excitement as we did so. At least that was until we saw the outline of the trees and we realized where it had fallen. There, in the opening to the woodlands, I spotted the glimmering stone. It was lying there on top of a mysterious black ribbon. It looked unnatural in the light. It was covered in fine silk and had 2 white flowers at the top, the petals curled. It looked so unusual in the wilderness, and before I could even stop my feet, I stepped beyond the border of grass and trees and bent down to pick it up. It felt cold to touch and caused my fingers to prickle with a pins and needles sensation. From that moment, I was mesmerized by it, and I knew I needed this ribbon to be mine. It was such an unusual thing, found in a place that it should not be. It seemed I had more in common with that ribbon than I did with anyone or anything else in the whole world. John was so angry with me for doing such a thing, but I told him it's fine. I'd barely entered the woodlands. I kept that ribbon as a keepsake and put it in my pocket. It was a novelty for me to have such a beautiful thing. I've hidden it in my room, in the special place where I know our guardian Martin will never think to look. He's a good man who cares greatly for John and me, but he has no understanding of these things. If something holds no purpose, then he sees no need for it. I like to believe that as long as there is a need or curiosity for something, well, then there's a purpose. I like having nice things. It makes me feel like I'm more than just an orphan, that I'm here for a reason. August 3rd, 1756. I left the Bible that I was gifted from the orphanage on the dresser by accident, and Martin found it. The fury in his eyes is like nothing I've witnessed ever before. He told me that the words in the Bible are a lie, and that if there was a God, he would not have bestowed such a cruel, parentless fate upon us. I know he does not mean it to be so cruel. He lost his faith when he lost his wife to sickness many years ago. His lack of faith comes from undiluted grief. I still sobbed until I could do so no more. And John comforted me and told me that when we were old enough, we would choose our own faith. Well, I know now that this is not enough for me. I do not wish to wait. I've persuaded John to be brave and bold. And on our next adventure, we will wander through the briars and we will visit the church for ourselves. August 10th, 1756, I wrapped the black ribbon around my wrist for luck. And even though I made sure it remained out of view beneath the frill sleeves of my worn yellow dress, just knowing that it was there, it was enough to give me strength. All we hoped for was that God would bless us and forgive Martin. Martin had taken us in and given us a home, water, and food when no one else had. There was goodness in his heart despite his lack of faith. John and I planned to sneak across the meadow to church, but due to a heavy rainstorm the night before, the pathway forward was muddy and unusable. John said that we should head back, but I looked over to the woodlands, and as I tapped my fingers along that black ribbon, I felt a calling. I told him we could take a shortcut through them instead, but he refused. He tried to stop me. I didn't listen to him. I didn't fear the woodlands anymore. And I left John behind and I stepped amid the trees. I made it to the church and I prayed. I prayed that Martin would be forgiven and that one day there would be a sign, one that would give me all the answers that I ever needed from this life. On the way back through the woodlands, I sensed something around me. A shadow I couldn't see. The woodlands were silent. I didn't hear as much as a squirrel scurrying or a chirping bird. The silence should have been chilling, but yet I found it comforting. Having no noise or voices surrounding me or in my head was a relief. John was waiting for me, his face contorted in concern of my appearance. He pointed a shaking finger at my arm, and my eyes followed this. My sleeves were tattered and ripped with blood and cuts covering them, and worst of all, my black ribbon had gone. I missed it so, my wrist bare without it. I didn't understand it. I hadn't felt a single cut or snag as I walked through the woodlands. All I'd felt was peace. I wanted to run back in there and find that ribbon, but John held me back and said, "Effie, the woodlands have it now. There's nothing you can do about it." I know it was just a ribbon to him, but to me it was so much more. My skin and mind itched without it. I yearned for it, and I wasn't sure why. But also in my heart, I knew the ribbon would find me again, one day. Now, I sense the change in the air, and I know a darkness is coming, one that can't be swerved or veered from. One I can't explain. It's a darkness coming from those woodlands. It's coming for me. I know in my gut that as much as I long for the black ribbon I'd found and then lost, it'll also lead me to my doom. December 12th, 1757. Winter is here, cold and unrelenting. The endless rainfall keeps us indoors, and a constant cold chill possesses the damp walls of our cottage. I stare at the scars on my arms, and I wonder, as I do so often, what happened to me in those woodlands? Does a black ribbon remain there, dotted with frost, tangled to a branch and swaying in the breeze? It haunts my dreams. I see it there, out of reach from me as shadowy hands reach out to grab it. I wake in hot sweats while I shiver through the coldness of reality. I fear I will die here in this fateful place, and that Martin was right after all, that there is no God or afterlife. There's only this endless darkness. February 10th, 1757. As our hands shivered in the freezing cold, I told John that I had been questioning the existence of God, and I began to think that Martin was right all along. But it was at this moment that we made a secret pact. John held my cold, pale hand and said, "Okay, well then let's make a promise, that whichever one of us dies first, we will visit the other one after our death. And then this will prove that there's an afterlife." I agreed to this with the hope in my heart that we would survive the cold spell at least, and it would be many years before this pact could come to be, and either he or I would meet a ghostly version of the other. Yet I felt this tingling on my bare wrist, and I knew the darkness would find sorrow somewhere. It wouldn't stop until it had its fill. The truth was that I knew in the dark woods of Ireland I'd found something I was never meant to find. That black ribbon, and now I can't help but feel incomplete without it. April 5th, 1757. On the first signs of spring, John rose with the bird call and left the cottage before I woke up. But when he returned, he rushed toward me, his clothes ripped and smudged with dirt and something hidden in his hand. He said, "I have something for you," and then uncurled his hand. I couldn't believe my eyes. There lay the black ribbon, perfectly raven in shade with no glimpse of a fray or tear. The flowers were perfect as well, 2 bursts of white amid the darkness. He tied the ribbon around my wrist, and as he pressed his fingers to it, repeated his pact. "I know I will die first. The shadows told me today. And I promise, when I do, I'll visit you." I wanted to tell him he was being silly, but as I was staring downward, I only saw decay where his fleshy fingertips should be. I know it wasn't real. It was a dream of the woken mind, but I also felt in my heart it rang true. I mentioned no more about it. I thought it best not to ask. Some things were just better that way. The ribbon felt as right on my wrist as it did wrong. I felt the impending darkness. I heard cries of sorrow, but there was absolutely nothing I could do to stop them. The ribbon had found me again, as I always knew it would do, and now I had to let it unfold the way it wished for things to be. Little did I know that it was too late to save John. He had stepped into the woodlands. His path was now unchangeable. With everything in this world, there is disbelief, but there is also knowledge. The ribbon was mine, as much as it also belonged to the woodlands. June 20th, 1770. Age 26. It was the most beautiful of summer days, and John's wedding to Catherine was wonderful. I had no means of gift-giving, other than something personal, so I took the black ribbon from my wrist and I passed it to John. He seemed flattered by such a gesture and promised to always keep it with him. I enjoyed the day, and I must admit, although I noticed the guest there, Sir Tristram Beresford. I'm already 26, and I never expected a man like him to notice me. I don't know why, but he seemed to take a liking to me, and invited me into Curraghmore House, where I marveled at the rare crystal chandeliers and beautiful paintings decorated across the wall. It was like I imagined it to be as a child, only even better. Despite his wealth and fortune, Tristram is a deeply kind-hearted man and never makes me feel any different. Each moment with him feels like the first hope of spring. Little did I know that that spring would turn into an endless freezing hell. September 8, 1770. I am no longer a nobody, but a wife. I love Tristram and the life that we live. In the ballroom on the first floor, we regularly hold gatherings and have people visiting from all across Ireland and Britain. I am literally living one of my childhood dreams, and I hope I never wake up. John and I often exchanged letters and on occasion visited each other, although not as often as I would like. Imagine my surprise when one night, when my husband was away and I was alone in my bedroom, I looked across the corner of the room and I thought I could see a shadow emerge from the walls. I rubbed my eyes and I noticed that John was standing at the foot of my bed. I jumped up and I managed to say, "John, what are you doing here?" He seemed not altogether there, and I rubbed my eyes again, partly sure I was imagining him, but he remained there, a vivid shadow that began to take a firmer form. He softly spoke, "Dear Effie, have you not forgotten our pact? When we were both young, we promised that if one of us died, the other would visit as a spirit and inform the other that the afterlife is true. I knew it would be me first. Remember?" And I spoke in a whisper, "Wait, what? You're gone?" John smiled and said, "Yes, but don't you see? This is good news. The Christian faith is the one true faith, and you will be rewarded in the afterlife. Don't you see?" I still didn't believe him, but he continued, "Look, I don't have much time, so I'm afraid that I have to deliver some bad news. Ever since visiting the other world, I knew I was going to see you, so I gathered any information I could find about you. All of your future is set in stone, and I have some things that you should know about." I struggled to keep up with what he was saying, but I asked him, "Tell me anyway. You will soon give birth to a beautiful baby boy. However, I'm afraid that in 8 years' time, Tristan will pass away unexpectedly. Please do not be too disheartened by this, for you will find love once again. You will marry another man, and happiness will return. The bad news is that you will pass away at the age of 37. Now, I do not know how or why, but this is what is fated for you." I refused to believe him. I told him that he was way too old for this prank, or was this some sort of trick of my own mind? John then waved his hand in the air, and to my frightful surprise, one of the curtains pulled itself shut. Other objects responded to the movement of his hand as if he were a puppet master pulling invisible strings. Despite being several feet away, a candle blew out and toppled over, and a painting on the wall rattled before tumbling onto the floor, the frame splintering around it. But I still refused to believe him, and I asked him, "Okay, touch me as proof that it wasn't a vision of my mind." He warned me against this, but I insisted he must touch me for me to believe him. I witnessed his fingers tremble across my wrist and watched in horror as it started to shrink and shrivel. A dark shadow flickered across his eyes and his voice lowered as he said, "You must listen to me. Never go to the woodlands. Darkness seeps and oozes there. One that lingers deep within your own soul and longs to consume us all. Don't give it the chance to strengthen." I stood there, frozen, as I heard his words and I watched my wrist slowly disappear. Had he not moved it when he did, it would have vanished completely. And then, without a word of goodbye, it was John who had vanished. But there on my deformed wrist, that appeared from nowhere, was the black ribbon. As the sunlight shone through my window the next morning, I calmly smiled, realizing that it was all merely a dream. Clearly, in the back of my mind, I dearly missed John, and I should definitely go visit him sometime soon. And then I looked down at my wrist. I noticed the black ribbon and I gasped for breath. As I touched it, I felt the hideous indents of my shrunken skin that I knew existed beneath the ribbon's ruse. It was ungodly, unsightly, and very real. I clearly did not dream about what happened last night. Suddenly, a servant knocked on my door and I answered, holding my arm behind my back. "Lady Beresford," she urgently said. I told her that I was busy and she said, "It's about your brother John. There's a letter." I went out to open the door. I grabbed the letter off her with my left hand and I read it instantly. It was from his wife. John had died. He had kept his promise. Grief is all-consuming, but so is the knowledge that I didn't imagine his ghostly presence. It's as real as my shrunken wrist and the black ribbon that covers it. July 15th, 1771. Age 27. The grief surrounding John's death is incredibly difficult, to the extent that I feel sick with sadness. I sometimes spend all day in bed, pained by the ghostly vision and the darkness of it all. Holding the baby in my arms 9 months after his passing was not a surprise. The doctor handed this beautiful creature to me, informing me that I had just given birth to a healthy baby boy, and I cried tears of happiness. I decided to name him John. However, this moment of joy was tainted by the realization that if John had correctly predicted this moment, was he right about the other moments too? I didn't know what to tell Tristram. How can I tell him that due to a dead man's predictions, he will soon be dead? This is just the ramblings of a madwoman, and I know some who have been locked away for saying much less. I cannot tell him this even though I know I am not mad. I should be happy about the baby, but all I think about is John. His name sticks on my tongue and tastes bitter. As I touch the black ribbon that adorns my deformed wrist, I feel the touch of icy coldness and the desperate hunger of that childhood winter. It haunts my thoughts. August 1st, 1778, age 34. I thought my love for Tristram would save him, but I was wrong. This morning I tried to wake him from his slumber, but no amount of shaking or baking would suffice. I saw his lifeless body and begged for it to be different. I felt it. The emptiness. John was right. My love is dead, and now only a dark void is left there, taunting me from within. It's summer, but I live in the winter of mourning, and I fear it will never pass. The woodlands call me, and the longing for the darkness to claim me is overwhelming. I hear them whisper in my thoughts, luring me out to those dark, gnarly branches, luring me to my fate. I want them to entwine around me until that's all I become. I will head there at darkness and end this. The black ribbon feels belonging on my deformed wrist. It calls to me. I know this sounds crazy, but it does. It's not words, but it's a feeling that tells me that I must carry my grief to the woodlands. August 15th, 1778. He found me in the woodlands. I remember his handsome face visible through the leafless branches. A vision of beauty in such a dark place. He lifted my fragile body in his arms and he led me through the darkness and into the light. The black ribbon was missing from my wrist when I woke, and my body covered in cuts and bruises that I have no recollection of getting. That man, Patrick, seemed unfazed by my imperfections and my grotesquely shrunken wrist. I knew from the moment I saw him I would marry this man. It was fated. I couldn't explain how, but I knew. This is how it must be. December 24th, 1778, age 34. I hid my wrist from the entire world, with the exception of Patrick. With him, I could truly be myself, but still, I could not plague him with the truth. The years tick by, and I cannot stop them. Year upon year upon year. One day they will run out, and I will meet my end. But for now, I must live and enjoy this good fortune life has granted me. But that darkness wriggles away in the back of my mind, as it has done for many years. I know in my heart that one day it will strike, and when it does, those shadows are coming for me. August 15th, 1781, age 37. I have been idle in writing lately. The shadows flicker in my mind and in my thoughts. I write this on the morning of my 37th birthday. This, I fear, is the day of my demise. I watch the clock hands drift closer and closer to midnight and wait for the worst. Patrick senses my discomfort, but I can't tell him my fate. Instead, I planted a kiss on his cheek and I told him he was a good man. He laughs at this, and in that laugh, I see it there in his eye, a flicker of a shadow, just like I saw in John's eyes on the day his spirit visited me. As Patrick wiped the hair from my face, I went deadly cold as he whispered in my ear, "The darkness has waited patiently. Effie, my love, now is your time." I pulled away from him, my smile now forced as I watched him leave. I longed to hope it wasn't as I believed it, but I knew as I watched him walk away and shift into a creature made from shadows that he was never mine. He belonged to the woodlands, same as me. And so, with that knowledge in my mind, I prepared to leave this place and tread barefoot to the woodlands where this all began. I left a goodbye note to my dear son, John, and I hope that one day he understands my actions and he knows better than to ever go near the woodlands. There is only one thing left for me to do in this life. I must answer the calling of shadows and find that black ribbon. Lady Beresford's dead body was discovered the day after her 37th birthday by her butler, the only one of her staff daring enough to step into the woodlands to look for her. Her arms and face were covered in fresh scratches and bruises, and her face was twisted with fear. But on her wrist, covering her deformity, was a black ribbon with 2 white flowers. Now, records show that the butler died shortly after this, taking his own life after claiming the darkness was after him. But as for Patrick, it is said he vanished as quickly as he appeared, in a fleeting shadow heading toward the woodlands. To this day, the whereabouts of the black ribbon remain a mystery. Some say Lady Beresford was buried wearing it, but others say the woodlands claimed it back. The stories of horrors that reside in the woodlands surrounding Curraghmore House continue to this day. Few dare to enter it, and for those who do, many have claimed to have seen the ghostly figure of a barefooted woman with scratches on her arms, disappearing into the trees. For more scary horror stories, please subscribe.